Welcome to Figments of Digital Imagination. I'm your host, Dan Leaf, call sign Fig, and today I'm going to talk about how the U.S. can win the AI arms race, because some say the U.S. lead in artificial intelligence has shrunk from 2 years to just 7 months over the PRC. But first, a word from a new sponsor of Figments, Vernetics. Vernetics provides remarkable next-generation cyber capabilities. You can learn more at vernetics.com. The development of Anthropic's Claude Mythos preview represents a critical turning point in the export control landscape by demonstrating that the most immediate national security risks now stem from software capabilities rather than physical hardware. It highlights a stark reality. If adversarial nations can reverse engineer or extract the learned architectural behavior of models like Mythos, they can acquire devastating cyber warfare tools and completely bypass U.S. hardware embargoes on advanced GPUs. And yet, in a recent Financial Times op-ed, a former Biden administration official named Chris McGuire advocates doubling down on the failed embargo strategy, proposing a total ban on advanced chip sales to China. This wholly defensive mindset is not what will win the race. The U.S. has to aggressively advance its AI dominance, and that won't happen with more hyper-regulation and restrictions others can work around while those restrictions hamstring U.S. industry. Let's dig a little deeper. To maintain a strategic advantage in artificial intelligence, the United States government implemented a straightforward strategy: block access to the hardware that makes AI possible. These export controls specifically targeted advanced graphics processing units, the physical semiconductors that provide massive computing power required to train modern neural networks. Despite these embargoes, Chinese development labs have recently released powerful open-weight AI models like DeepSeek that perform on par with Western systems while costing a fraction of the price to train. The rapid advancement of these models poses an immediate threat to national security, as the People's Liberation Army actively researches how to integrate these high-level AI capabilities into their defense networks and military applications. A border wall built to stop shipping containers struggles to contain an asset that exists primarily as data and code. And without physical access to the chips, Chinese companies bypass the bans through a cloud computing loophole. They rent computing time on restricted American processors housed in offshore data centers located in third countries. Another evasion tactic is model distillation, where Chinese labs purchase API access to leading American AI platforms using the outputs to train smaller models. This extracts top-tier capabilities without needing the massive data centers of banned chips to train models from the ground up. And when physical hardware is necessary, illicit supply chains have successfully routed billions of dollars in restricted processors into China by smuggling them through non-aligned countries. The success of these three evasion paths made it obvious to lawmakers that regulating physical hardware shipments at the border is no longer enough. And Congress has responded with a barrage of new legislative proposals, shifting away from policing physical objects to monitoring digital access. The Remote Access Security Act attempts to close the data center loophole by making offshore rental of cloud computing a controlled export subject to the same strict bans. The Deterring American AI Theft Act would direct financial sanctions against any foreign lab caught using distillation to extract data from a U.S. model. Meanwhile, the Stop Stealing Our Chips Act incentivizes whistleblowers to expose smuggling rings. And finally, the proposed Match Act attempts to restrict the export of the actual manufacturing equipment required to build the chips in the first place. But passing a new law to counter every new discovered technical loophole creates an exhausting cycle where regulators are constantly reacting to evasion tactics that have already served their purpose. Expanding these restrictions across every facet of the supply chain risks cutting American companies off from a Chinese market that traditionally accounts for roughly 25% of global AI chip consumption. When earlier versions of these export restrictions went into effect, leading American semiconductor manufacturers absorbed billions of dollars in immediate financial damage. This creates an innovation boomerang, as American chip designers rely on massive global sales to fund research and development required to stay ahead. Strangling their revenue limits their ability to innovate. Simultaneously, being locked out forced Beijing to construct completely independent, sanction-proof semiconductor supply chains, pouring state funding into domestic giants like Huawei. This table details the performance specifications of NVIDIA GPUs compared to China's domestically produced AI semiconductors. Looking at the compute performance row, Huawei's new Ascend 910C processor is steadily closing the gap with older generation video hardware. Enforcing total economic isolation yields a paradox where U.S. attempts to starve a foreign AI industry end up draining the capital required to sustain America's own technological dominance. Relying on solely defensive trade embargoes strains diplomatic ties and exhausts domestic industries, pushing policy experts to identify security measures that don't depend entirely on border control. One engineering solution is verification by design. This embeds GPS-like tracking directly into the silicon architecture of advanced processors. And if a smuggled chip detects it left an approved geographic zone, the hardware automatically shuts down. A second alternative is multilateral alignment. Rather than issuing unilateral bans, the United States should synchronize its technology export diplomacy with key manufacturing allies to establish a global regulatory standard. Finally, the United States can shift focus inward and strengthen the American AI stack, aggressively funding the domestic power grid, data center infrastructure, and developing engineering talent for next-generation computing. A competitive lead cannot be preserved entirely through defensive regulation. Securing the future of artificial intelligence requires investing capital and infrastructure needed to simply run faster than the competition. You don't have to be a cyber scientist or silicon surgeon to experience the value of mundane computing with lesser quality chips. Just shop online with Amazon. They use proprietary but less advanced AWS Trainium chips to power their digital assistant Rufus and their entire Nova suite of advanced AI models. Prime Day may not be a national security event, but if the AI end of that massive endeavor can be built and run on third-tier processors, the chips are not the problem. Certainly, the U.S. should find effective ways to prevent chips from being secretly diverted to China through third parties, but the motivation should be protection of American business as much as it safeguards intellectual process. We need to work to close cloud loopholes and prevent access to U.S. chips through cloud computing services, and the pursuit of robust firewalls protecting American AI models from direct or remote access is essential. But none of those guarantee the U.S. will remain the global AI leader, a status that benefits other countries as well. American industry needs to be unleashed economically, less encumbered by hyperregulation, in order to advance and innovate. That requires global sales to generate the capital necessary for sustaining the industrial engine through the duration of this marathon. President Trump recognizes that investment and development of manufacturing capacity and the AI workforce aren't enough. There must be robust expansion of the energy grid to power this work. The administration has several initiatives to protect consumers from massive rate increases while enabling private investment in the grid. That private investment also requires capital, funds that will only be available if U.S. technology companies are globally competitive. It is past time for the U.S. government to focus on creating an environment where American companies across the cyber landscape can focus on winning the race to develop and protect the best artificial intelligence capabilities on the planet. Thanks for watching this episode of Figments of Digital Imagination. Please subscribe to the channel, and if you liked it, click like. And don't forget to visit Vernetics.com and look into their next generation cyber capabilities. I'll see you next time on Figments of Digital Imagination.